Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go up to all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. Welcome.
All right, guys. Today's date, December 28, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that even though this is a news podcast, we do try to watch our language. The words do fly at the same time. There may be things that might be shown that might be too graphic for viewers, especially the younger variety. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we start this couple of days into the last days of 2022 before we get to 2023? Well, let's just say that Mother Nature's not done with us yet. And if you're from the South, the last couple of days have been pretty rough, but have shined a light on our infrastructure problem that is still plaguing a lot of our southern states.
Down south, where temperatures rarely dip this low, the bitter cold is taking a toll on the water system. In city after city, pipes snapping, leaking, and leaving thousands without running water. At South Carolina's largest food bank, a burst pipe threatened the food supply for thousands. Water forced Atlanta's busy airport to temporarily close a gate. The issue spanned from Memphis to Selma to Jackson, Mississippi, a city long plagued by water problems. There, officials issued a boil water alert on Christmas Day.
Were you able to cook Christmas dinner?
No, it was very disappointing.
Katisha Bragg has already been without water 5 times this year. That means spending her days waiting in line for cases of bottled water.
It takes a bottle of water just, to wash your hands. So then brush your teeth. That's another bottle of water.
So those cases are gone in a day, and then you have to go back and do the whole thing all over again the next day?
Yes.
In a statement today, city officials say we continue to struggle to return pressure, citing significant leaks in the system that we have yet to identify. Jackson's water crisis stretches back decades. Over the summer, residents spent months without clean water. Last week, Congress approved $600 million to help Jackson's infrastructure, though some leaders say a meaningful fix will take years. Katisha says she is willing to wait.
So I'm hopeful. It's frustrating, but this is where I choose to be.
Blaine Alexander, NBC News.
So yeah, when you look at it, Jackson, Mississippi, a story that was covered just a few months ago, that when they had severe flooding, that their main filtration center went down. And here we are, fast forward a couple months later, we're solving the same problem. And it's not just Jackson, Mississippi. There are multiple states. Even mine, my home state of Tennessee, is also no exception. Why? For the simple fact of the matter is just that we talk about infrastructure all the time. I mean, not just your water filtration systems, your roads, your bridges, overpasses, your fiber optics, your internet structures, things of that nature. In the South are all woefully needing not just upgrades, but needing not just repair. It just needs to be literally torn down and built back up again. And it's amazing to me that only in the South would they try to find some way to justify this. Oh, well, Congress gave us $600 million to fix it. So why are you not implementing immediate means to repair these things? That's the thing I ask. And again, I should know it's the South, heavily conservative. I know with conservatives will always sit there and say, well, we need to create more jobs. We need to do this. Wouldn't this be a perfect opportunity to back up exactly what the frack you're saying? We need to create more jobs. Sounds like a lot of things in the public sector. Sounds like construction jobs are needed. Sounds like more crews need to be added. It sounds like a lot of projects that are going to take maybe not, well, let's be honest, it may take decades. But again, There's your job creation right there. There's workers getting paid right there. There's a budget of $600 million that's been allocated to fix these things right there. And yet, what are these states doing? What are they doing? Because I would ask the same question. It is amazing to me how the money is there to have something fixed, and yet we hear nothing. I do not understand that. I'm not just singling out Mississippi, but I can single out Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. I could single all of them out and still ask the same question to these local and state governments that your states, who, by the way, have turned down federal funding. I guarantee in this case, they're not going to turn it down now. But at the same time, this could have been fixed. This could have been avoided. But somewhere along the lines, there has to be a decision made that goes, you know what? We have to do the one thing that is going to probably take longer than any of our terms combined. And that is upgrading our infrastructure. I mean, Joe Biden ran on this. It was in the Build Back America plan that got watered down to whatever a shell of itself before it finally got approved. But the infrastructure is still there. And yet, for the life of me, in Jackson, of all places, and I know Jackson is, like, for a lot of people, that's a heavily minority populated area. People who have homes, have land there, but you don't have clean running water. But they will stay more sending. But I guarantee those public utilities will still send bills. Even now, when we just got out of a bad snowstorm because Mother Nature decided that she wasn't done with us yet. And I guarantee utilities love when we run our heat, because sometimes we have no choice. We run our gas because we don't have no choice. We have to keep warm. We need heat to survive the intolerable cold. But trust me, those utilities, those bill paying services of utilities, they never go down because they always remain on time. But if I was those individuals in Jackson, I would be a part of that federal lawsuit. The federal lawsuit that's being placed against them. But I fear the problem is going to be that not one government official will ever see criminal charges, because it is criminal. Because how in the world can we be how we call ourselves the greatest country in the world and we're having third world problems with having clean water to drink, to bathe, to cook with? How are we having this problem? And I'll tell you how. Because, simply put, the money that's being used for infrastructure is getting placed elsewhere, and years of decay is now coming back to roost. It's coming back. And no matter how you cut the mustard, somebody along the lines has to finally get this done. But for conservatives, because they run the joint, how in the world do you miss an opportunity to sit there and say, we're creating jobs by fixing our infrastructure? This may take 10 to 15 years, but think of the jobs we'll bring in. Think of the people who get back to work. Think of the money. Think of exactly everything that we're doing to save for future issues. You will rarely hear one job spouting, Trump loving conservative say exactly that. That's my point. But again, I am not surprised. I'm just not. I really am not. But you know what else I'm not surprised by? Because, again, we were waiting on the story as well. And this is why I say it's dangerous to have a conservative-leaning court, because that conservative-leaning Supreme Court just gave their decision about Title 42. And I'm not surprised.
News on the border restriction known as Title 42. The Supreme Court ruling that it will remain in effect for now. NBC's Sam Brock is in El Paso, Texas, with the latest. And Sam, we can see the reality of the border there behind you, and tonight some major news.
Yeah, Tom, as you look around me right now, it is organized chaos here in El Paso, one of many cities across the country that's dealing with an immigration crisis right now. And Tom, the Supreme Court voting 5-4 today to extend Title 42 as an emergency measure, taking up the case, which is now going to be decided in June.
After months of legal limbo, the Supreme Court siding with Republican lawmakers in keeping Title 42 intact for now. The policy allows the government to block asylum seekers from some countries, but not others. The conditions have been dire. Overnight in El Paso, bodies bundled by blankets and near freezing temperatures, with local shelters either full or unavailable to those without proper documentation. A nearby bus serving as the only break from the cold. Some migrants showing us cut wrists from cartels, skin damaged by the freeze, and perilous train rides. This family traveled for 5 months from Honduras with 5 kids, the youngest a 1-year-old, all covered in blankets that are wet from frost, now sick with the flu or gripe.
¿Qué quieres hacer?
What do you want to do? I ask. The father tells me a life where my kids can study, a nice roof over our heads and clothes, as the mother adds, and to be free.
¿Cómo recibiste?
This man from Venezuela says the clothes he's wearing came from churches, nonprofits, and Good Samaritans. With lives at stake, the politics have taken center stage. Texas Governor Greg Abbott tonight tweeting about the nearly 16,000 migrants that Texas has bussed all over the U.S. We're providing relief to local communities overwhelmed by President Biden's open border policies, he wrote. The White House tonight saying Title 42 is a public health measure. It should not be extended indefinitely. Adding, to truly fix our broken immigration system, we need Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And with no measures in sight, it's status quo. As people line up and wait for food, wondering still what their future will look like only months from now. Sam Brock.
And here's the crazy part. Here's the crazy part about all this. Now, of course, I'm going to be so honest about what I'm about to say right now. I'm not surprised from a conservative Supreme Court. And I said this, and I'll keep saying this because it makes the most sense. A conservative-leaning Supreme Court has always been effing dangerous. It has always been effing dangerous. Just because of the fact Title 42, for all those who don't know, was a measure that was put in place to block, as the journalist said, to block block people who are claiming asylum from certain areas. Those certain areas being brown countries, because I have yet to see any Russians, Ukrainians, or any of the European nature ever get blocked for claiming asylum from war-torn countries. But they are blocking South America. They are blocking Mexico. They are blocking those that were in from war-torn areas, saying that, oh, well, it's a public health issue. Because at the time it was COVID in its heyday, the Trump administration didn't know what the frack they were doing. And at the same time, you have just enough of the Mayo variety to stand in and say, we don't want any more immigrants to come in because they're going to send us the worst of their people. They're going to take our jobs. They're going to have anchor babies. And in 20 years, they're going to be the biggest majority while we're the minority. I wish I could make this up, but that's exactly what a lot of those conservatives and people like-minded like them are still out there saying. Because it's always been that fear, the fear that you've been on top for so long that eventually that your time on the food chain is going to come down, and that scares a lot of people. At the same time, the fact they're still using Title 42, which if you guys haven't noticed, COVID's not being talked about a lot. And I'm not saying that COVID is gone when you're still in a pandemic, you still protect yourselves. That is all given and true. But for them to cite a public health issue instead of just saying what they really want to say, that's some BS. Even more so to where Governor Greg Abbott, a man who literally, in my opinion, his gun measures may have led to a lot of younger people and teachers losing their lives. That individual literally sit there and says this, and I just want to bring this up for you guys to see for yourselves. Keep in mind what he said. He tweeted, Texas has bused 15,900 immigrants to sanctuary cities, 8,900 to D.C., 4,900 to NYC, 1,500 to Chicago, over 630 to Philadelphia. We're providing relief to local communities overwhelmed by President Biden's open border policies. Let me tell you the problem with this is. This is coming from a guy whose state had refused federal funding to actually help with those immigrants, but instead decided to use those same dollars to turn around and sit there and say, hey, we're going to send you to the more liberal areas. Because you know what he didn't send them to? He didn't send them to Florida. He didn't send them to Tennessee. He didn't send them to Utah. He didn't send them to South Carolina. He didn't send them to North Carolina. You know where he sent them to? He specifically sent them to certain places because he wanted to prove a point. And to me, what's more scary about that is the fact that he was allowed to do it. And the danger, and I say danger, that this causes. that how in the world, number one, can a governor turn around and do this and not be held accountable? Not be held accountable at all. But you know what his excuse was? The excuse was they signed a form. I wish I could make this up, but his excuse is they signed a form.
Days after buses of migrants were dropped off in 18-degree cold on Christmas Eve outside the vice president's home in Washington, a spokesperson for Texas Governor Greg Abbott confirming the migrants came from Texas, saying they willingly chose to go. Many of the migrants, including children, were not wearing proper winter coats and clothing. Abbott's communications director saying the migrants signed a voluntary consent waiver in multiple languages. Abbott recently spoke to ABC's Martha Raddatz about the bus drop-off in multiple cities.
And I removed them to locations that self-identified as sanctuary cities that have the capability and the desire to help out these migrants. And so that's exactly what's taking place.
The White House calling the move on Christmas Eve a shameful stunt, but Abbott's office firing back, slamming the White House as a bunch of hypocrites. The back and forth comes as both sides await a ruling from the Supreme Court on Title 42, a pandemic-era policy that allows the government to expel asylum seekers on public health grounds. The Biden administration argues the COVID emergency is over. Abbott says otherwise.
Whether it's COVID or some other issue, when you got people coming across the globe without knowing at all what their health status is, that almost by definition is a public health risk. There's every reason to keep that in place.
And now new figures show the extent of the crisis. Nearly 1.6 million people are now waiting for their asylum applications to be processed, a record number, with cases now 7 times higher than a decade ago. By the way, the average wait time for an asylum.
Yeah, the average wait time for asylum, for requesting asylum, can be up to 2 years. But what amazes me so is that how Greg Abbott, who in my mind is probably the biggest POS next to Trump and Lindsey Graham, tries to justify that. Well, they call themselves sanctuary cities. Well, yeah, they had to, because you know why? Because when the immigrant problem had occurred, a lot of you, Greg Abbott, a lot of you, Mr. I was gonna say Rick Sanchez. I had to stop myself. The governor of Florida, and his stunt. Remember, they all turned around. Remember, they all sat there and turned around and said, "Oh, well, you know what? The border's closed here in Florida, just like the border's closed here in Texas. The border closes here in Tennessee." Our own Governor Bill Lee, yeah, that idiot, called Tennessee persona non grata to immigrants. But other cities and states had to sit there and go, you know what, we're sanctuary areas. And then here's what you did, and here's what you smart-ass conservatives did. You turned around and said, oh, you're a sanctuary city? No problem. Let's fly those immigrants to your area, and completely overwhelm you. Which is kind of ironic, in the fact that a bunch of conservatives are always worried about immigrants taking their jobs, and yet they're passing on the people that will gladly help them, that will gladly help those immigrants, while saying, well, that's what you guys wanted to do, but your fear is that those same people are being helped to take your jobs. But it's amazing that he also said this as a public health issue. We don't know where these people come from. Yes, you're exactly right. We don't know where these people have come from. So you know what would have made more fucking sense? What would have made more fucking sense? Instead of actually sending down the National Guard down to the border, how about you send immigration lawyers, judges, medical assistants, the same thing that you're doing for Ukraine, the same thing that you can do at the border. The money that you're paying out to Ukraine could be the same money, resources, and personnel that you can send down to the border and actually help these people instead of calling it a crisis. That's my whole thing. That's why when Trump sent the National Guard, instead of sending people, resources to help these individuals, help these families and whatnot, he sends the army. Even now, Governor Greg Abbott has directed the National Guard to erect fencing along the Texas border. Yes, what a wonderful way to say that we're a nation of immigrants. We're putting up walls and barbed wire. Makes complete and total BS. And on top of that, again, that's like, I really hate to be the guy that sounds like the broken record. I hate to be that guy. But it's amazing when they say, well, if someone would just come up with immigration reform, then we would actually have this problem. This is why I say I can't stand conservatives, because conservatives to me have the biggest memory issue I've ever seen. For all those that don't remember, during the Obama administration, there was the DREAM Act, where immigrations actually had a path to citizenship. If they served in the army or things of that nature, then they would actually be on a path to citizenship. You know what? You know who actually was against that at the time? Conservatives. Oh, well, anybody can just join the DREAM Act and just become on a path to citizenship. Yes, that was the immigration reform that you asked for. And at the same time, because it's an idea that you did not support, an idea that you did not create, and of course, the day conservatives come up with immigration reform will be the day we see an ice cube in hell. We'll be the first ones to always turn down something. Even then, that the DREAM Act is still being argued in court, that is by far the closest we've ever gotten to immigration reform. But yet, one side of the Democrats wants to do it. And I say it's been time. Just like the Veterans Administration, the VA system needs to be completely upgraded and redone. But you know who's also against that? Conservatives. Why are conservatives against that? Because the medical industry lobbies them to. Because I still say if you serve this country, you should be able to get whatever care you want, whatever you need at the cost of the government because you have done your service. That, in my opinion, with veterans, wherever you want to go, whatever you want to get for medical issues or mental issues from your time in the service, you should be able to get free of charge your choice. That's how it should be. Veterans should not be stuck to going to the VA, waiting for hours at end, and still not getting the help they want, getting pushed pills that they don't want or don't need. At the same time, consider other things, unfortunately, like suicide because they're not getting the assistance they need. So why am I bringing this up? Immigration's the same way. We could solve immigration. Honestly, if I had more faith in this Congress, but I don't because it's going to be conservatives in the House and Democrats in the Senate, we could solve immigration within one term. We really could. But the problem is you will never get conservatives to agree on immigration reform unless it involves a wall. Unless it involves a wall, barbed wire, or anything else of that nature, you will never get conservatives to agree on immigration reform. Democrats only hope, and I say this all the time, because honestly, I wish this was brought up when Democrats had the House, had a slim majority in the Senate. And I wish they could have that to me, the reason why I'm mad at the Democrats was because they had a wasted opportunity. There were so many things that y'all guys really should have got through while you had the chance. Because come January, the 118th Congress gets sworn in, and Republicans are going to do a whole bunch of dumbass investigations, but bring nothing to the table. And at the same time, you will still have immigrants waiting at the border because they come from certain countries that certain conservatives don't like. Because again, the fear is that in the coming decades, the demographics will change and that people of the rice cake warrior variety will not be the majority anymore. And that alone scares them. But again, I feel like we're going to be doing the whole song and dance until something changes. But speaking of things changing, I know, guys, like I said, with the holidays almost wrapped up, I mean, we just got past Christmas and not too far off from New Year's. But if you're a fan of Southwest, or if you've had stock in Southwest, I'm pretty sure after the last 48 hours, you have some negative opinions of them right now. Just saying.
Growing frustration and anger at the nation's airports.
The Christmas was just ruined. This was the worst Christmas ever.
Stressed and stranded Southwest passengers fuming after the airline canceled more than 2,500 flights Tuesday, following thousands more earlier this week. Southwest blaming that massive holiday storm for its service cuts and rocky recovery.
The app on our phone said that our flight had been canceled.
Southwest passenger Kaylin O'Connor says her Monday flight to Pensacola was canceled, and the earliest she could rebook was Thursday. So she chose to drive 16 hours from Kansas City, Missouri.
Hopefully they will reimburse us.
Southwest CEO Bob Jordan apologizing, saying the airline's point-to-point operating system, which relies on a network of direct flights, is especially vulnerable to challenges like severe weather, making for a slower rebound than their competitors.
We're doing everything we can to return to a normal operation. And please also hear that I'm truly sorry.
Jordan says Southwest will significantly reduce flights over the coming days in hopes of being back on track before next week. Southwest Airlines Pilots Union says the carrier's outdated IT system is leaving stranded customers on hold for hours.
They're using processes and IT from the 1990s when we were an airline less than a quarter of the size.
The Southwest fallout prompting a U.S. Department of Transportation investigation.
Well, what we're seeing is something that is beyond what can be attributed to the weather. The bottom line is this is just not an acceptable level of service.
And the Senate Commerce Committee echoing calls for accountability from Southwest, pressing the airline to provide significant monetary compensation to not only cover passengers' tickets, but also hotels, meals, and transportation. Growing frustration.
Well, let's be honest, they're not going to do that. Yeah, like I said, I didn't travel, thank goodness, because I mean, traveling in the holidays has got to be a nightmare. But yes, imagine being stranded. And I mean, there's a TikTok video out there of one person that was Southwest Online saying that they have canceled all flights, that you will not be able to book flights at least for the next 24 hours. Please go home. I was trying to find that TikTok before I started this podcast, but it's out there. Trust me. But no, it is amazing to me what they're not saying, because part of it's saying, well, it's just because the hub and the weather, it just really caused a lot of stuff. Oh, it has nothing to do with the fact that you had a shortage of pilots and staff. See, it's amazing how this year has been the transition of, people finding better jobs, that nobody wants to work. Everybody wants to work, but nobody wants to work for peanuts anymore. In a COVID situation where it's already stressed out and people are considering their mental health over anything else, a lot of industries, especially the service industry, the airline industry, all had shortages. And of course, did nobody think that this was not going to affect us in the holiday season, especially with Southwest being one of the major airline carriers that a lot of people use to travel to and fro during the holiday season? And yet they had this problem. Now, this can be chalked to a lot of things. It can be chalked to a lot that the airline industry has made it a point that in some areas that they did not want to endorse other ways of travel. Sure, you can travel by car. It may take a couple hours or 10 or 15, depending where you're going to go to. But imagine if we had a high-speed rail system. That's all I'm saying. Imagine if we had other alternate forms of getting somewhere besides the air. What if we did have a high-speed rail system that went from coast to coast? What if we were able to include other forms of transportation? Because a lot of people are asking this question now, and I still ask this question. I still hope, I'm going to be honest, I'm still hoping within my lifetime that we do get that high-speed rail system. Because you know what? I would like to sit there and say, I would like to visit California. I don't mind, taking a bullet train for a couple of hours. I'll get there versus flying, because flying is a hassle. And unfortunately, because of security and things of that nature, things have changed as far as what you can do at an airport. I understand it. But still, Southwest will not see any penalties from this. You know why? Because the CEO will not step down. They will not get any penalties. They may refund or give travel vouchers out to some people, but don't expect what you're already getting from the CEO, because someone in public relations told the CEO, you really need to get on camera, you need to look sincere, and you need to apologize. Because someone said that was the best route to go, not realizing for the simple fact of the matter is like, no, if anything, you need to do a lot more. So as much lip service as Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, is giving us, there's not really you can do against Southwest except fine them, which they'll be able to pay off easily, and the CEO will keep its job. But again, a lot of people got stranded in the holiday season, especially during snowstorms. And unfortunately, because of the way our laws are set up, there will be zero accountability on Southwest's side. That's what sucks. But you know what else? I've always asked this question. Why is it when you apply for a job that experience, skills, which I understand, you shouldn't apply for being a welder if you don't have welding skills. You shouldn't be an electrician unless you've been certified. You shouldn't be a plumber unless you've been certified. You shouldn't be a nail technician unless you're certified. Shouldn't be a law officer. You should be a law enforcement officer. But let's be honest, you know my opinion on law enforcement officers anyway. But that being said, imagine if you're a politician and you lied on your resume, but you still got the job. And now everybody knows about it, but you're going to pretty much say, okay, I'm still keeping my job. This is a story I wish I could make up, but it's true.
Member of Congress who's now admitting he, quote, embellished his work and education history, misleading voters about key parts of his resume. But Republican George Santos says it won't stop him from taking office. Mary Alice Parks is in Washington with more. Mary Alice, good morning.
Yeah, Mary, good morning. The New York Republican tried to downplay this. He said everyone embellishes their resume, but ultimately he admitted that key parts of his background that he ran on were made up. Breaking his silence, New York Congressman-elect George Santos overnight admitting to fabricating entire parts of his background.
I apologize if anybody feels hurt or betrayed. I will gain everybody's trust back by just delivering results for them.
In a series of interviews, Santos now confirming many of the details in last week's New York Times investigation that revealed how the Long Island Republican seriously misrepresented his experience and parts of his personal life to voters.
I'm not a fraud. I'm not a cartoon character. I'm not some mythical creature that was invented. I'm no Russian puppet. I mean, for crying out loud.
Santos saying now he never did, in fact, graduate from college as he had claimed, saying he, quote, embellished his resume, telling the New York Post, I own up to that.
The reality is I'm human. I'm flawed. I'm not perfect.
He also admitted to never actually working for Goldman Sachs or Citigroup, saying now he worked for a company that did business with them.
I used a poor use of words, but I did work in the industry for a number of years. I did do work with all the institutions I've mentioned prior and more.
In other interviews, Santos addressing misleading statements like these he made on the campaign trail about his family's Jewish roots.
My grandparents survived the Holocaust. So these regimes of socialism, Marxism, they don't work.
Now saying he never claimed to be Jewish, that he is clearly Catholic, and he only said he was Jew-ish. Despite the controversy, the young Republican insisting he will not be deterred and that he can still be effective in Congress.
I'm not resigning. I have to leave Congress, Guy. It's going to be by a pink slip by the voters, November of 2024.
But Democrats have been quick to pounce on the allegations.
We need answers from George Santos. He appears to be a complete and utter fraud.
Now, New York does not have any recall laws, so some Democratic members of Congress are calling on him to resign or be expelled from Congress. But the only way to expel him would be if 2/3 majority voted him out. And since his win helped Republicans narrowly flip control of the House, Republicans are counting on him being there. Mary?
Just remarkable.
Ooh, you know what? I see why people go in politics now. I see it. I see it, and to me, how in the world, number one, I get it. It's like, oh, well, people embellish on their resumes all the time. You like to think so. I mean, you could lie on your resume and still don't get the job, but because you're Republican, you were, you claimed your family was Jewish, you said a lot of things that turned out to not be true, but hey, you're a politician, we expect that. But it's amazing to me that once you got the nod, once you got the job, once you're going to be sworn in come January, you're just like, yeah, I lied. I didn't graduate from college. I'm not really Jewish. But, I can still do great things. I can still help out. And I always want to ask this as a conservative, because he wasn't the only Republican that lied his ass off during this election season. I mean, let's be honest. And for all those who don't remember, Herschel Walker was making his rounds on that one. And you guys have heard me, multiple times on this podcast, every time he lied about something, it came back to haunt him. So it's one of those things that it's not surprising situations. Not surprising at all. But like you said, Republicans need him. Republicans need him for this next Congress because right now they hold the House and they need every seat they can get, which goes to show you Republicans do not give a shit about their constituents as long as they can hold power. So, as much as a messed up story as that is, do you think he's going to step down and resign? Nope. And conservatives are going to stick their heads in the sand and hope for it all to blow over. But speaking of things that are blowing over, we finally have a new spending bill. that has been passed and should be heading to President Biden's desk, albeit without any issues. And, well, we shouldn't be surprised about what's in it.
Hours before a potential government shutdown, the House of Representatives passing a $1.7 trillion spending package. The series of bills includes $45 billion in assistance for Ukraine, $858 billion in military spending. That includes a pay raise for troops, and $40 billion in disaster relief for Americans impacted by wildfires, earthquakes, and hurricanes. It also includes protections for pregnant workers, including expanding breastfeeding accommodations in the workplace, funding for childcare to assist low-income families, banning of TikTok on government devices, and reforms of the Electoral Count Act, the law that former President Trump and his allies tried to abuse to overturn the 2020 election. Democrats celebrating.
Indeed, this bill puts people over politics.
But a majority of House Republicans angered by how the deal was pushed through Congress.
The appropriations process has failed the American public, and there's no greater example of the nail in the coffin of the greatest failure of a one-party rule of the House, the Senate, and the presidency of this bill here.
The yeas are 68, the nays are 29.
The bill passed the Senate Thursday after drawn-out negotiations, 18 Republicans ultimately supporting the package, along with all Senate Democrats.
And I say this about my colleagues, their unity was miraculous. And, wow.
This spending package does not include about $10 billion to fight COVID, something the Biden administration had asked for but faced resistance from some Republicans in Congress. It now heads to President Biden's desk for his signature. Jay O'Brien, ABC News.
Okay, so of course, yeah, the spending package got passed, and yes, Republicans are mad. We're not surprised by this, but it's still, how can I put this ever so nicely? And we got to talk about it because, well, there's going to be some people wondering a couple of things, specifically this here. If you look at the 1.7 spending bill, guys, $45 billion to Ukraine, $858 billion in military spending, including a pay raise to the troops, and $40 billion in disaster aid. This is coming off the fact that a lot of people may be going, why are we sending Ukraine money? Because President Zelensky, forgive me if I pronounce his name, was here addressing Congress and, was actually asking for assistance, and, well, he got it. $45 billion to Ukraine. And at the same time, a lot of people are going, we could have used that, which I can't argue against. But I also said the same thing when Netanyahu of Israel, the prime minister of Israel, also came to the United States, also addressed Congress, and they gave Israel, if not more than $45 billion in foreign aid. But you know what I found was interesting? Nobody batted an eye. Not one person. And I have to ask this question because, again, I feel like whenever it does come to foreign aid, Congress has no problem sending out money, troops, and resources. When it comes to its own people, they rather pay attention to us only when it's election time. And that's the one time I would like to hold Democrats just as accountable as Republicans. The one time, because you're going to have a hard time trying to explain this, even though they added this to the bill as well. They did add, for all those guys who are paying attention, they did add in the 1.7 trillion protection for pregnant workers, including expanding breastfeeding accommodations in the workplace, funding for childcare to assist low-income families, ban on TikTok and government devices, and of course the overhauling Electoral Count Reform Act. Now, you're wondering about protection for pregnant workers. This does not include paid maternity leave. It doesn't. It just means that, if you want to breastfeed in the workplace, they're not gonna fire you. Funding for childcare for assist low-income families. You already gave it to them once, and then you pulled it away in the next administration. Why not just make it permanent since so many families depend upon it? Ban on TikTok and government devices, because only conservatives were crying about TikTok because they swore up and down a Chinese company was stealing secrets via government devices. I don't know about you guys, but I did not know that for government devices, who would be brave enough to put TikTok on a government device anyway? And of course, the Electoral Count Reform Act just means that if people do try to subvert the electoral count once again, that they will have higher charges to put to them. That's basically it. But at the same time, Ukraine still gets help. We're still in the dark. I'm sorry, Chuck Schumer, that yes, you can be happy that all Democrats became unified on this. But again, what is the American people going to get out of this besides bailing out another country where, in my opinion, should be helped out by the United Nations more than us, because we are not Team America World Police. Moving right along, guys, they did actually said the January 6th Commission actually finally said it outside of recommending charges for criminal prosecution to the Department of Justice. They finally came out and said, well, we have pretty much they're going to go, which we pretty much figured they're going to say this entire time. But because the clock is running out on their Congress run, they decided that, hey, now's a good time to tell you guys why we're going to do this whole investigation from Jump Street to confirm what you already know.
January 6th Select Committee dropping their final report and making it clear they believe former President Trump should never hold office again.
Had it not been for the encouragement of Donald Trump, would have never occurred.
The report drives home the committee's belief that Mr. Trump was principally responsible for the January 6th attack. It outlines 11 recommendations, among them reform of the Insurrection Act that would prevent the former president from serving again in public office. The report gives examples of Mr. Trump and his top aides engaging in at least 200 apparent acts of public or private outreach, pressure, or condemnation. Evidence Democratic committee member Jamie Raskin says shows January 6th was no accident.
What do you hope their biggest takeaway is? The first thing everybody should know is that there was nothing remotely spontaneous about this. This was not like a big rally that got out of hand.
Mr. Trump has blasted the committee, which is composed of 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans, all fierce critics of the former president, as, quote, highly partisan and a witch hunt, and blaming House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for not properly protecting the Capitol ahead of January 6th. The report does cite security and intelligence failures, but fails to unpack them in any degree of specificity. Democratic committee member Adam Schiff said reforms in that area are necessary.
The failure to assimilate that intelligence, the failure to act upon it, we set out in our conclusion, left that Capitol unprepared for the violence that ensued.
The committee's criminal referrals carry no legal weight. The decision to prosecute the former president will be up to the new special counsel, Jack.
Which he's right, not to cut him off, but yes. As we said before, that the committee did not have any criminal powers. They had to submit to the special counsel. But as I said before, they did submit recommendations for criminal charges to the Department of Justice for them to pursue. But for the rest of us, we're like, yeah, we knew what you guys were investigating from Jump Street, and it's not like we're all blind. Yes, Trump is responsible for what happened on January 6th. We know that. Now, what happens from there is a whole nother situation. It really, truly is. But I wouldn't be surprised because that Trump is already dodging bullets from saying he's going to run in 2024, that he's got multiple lawsuits, face the FBI over documents, a sexual harassment suit. His company was found fraudulent misleadings about business holdings. His CFO is in jail. I mean, you can go down the list. This is kind of reading like the bad end of a mafia crime story when it comes to Trump. But here's another thing that also bugged me, that when Trump was president, remember all those times he sat there and said that I can't show my taxes, I'm being audited, I can't really do that, it's a long process. Yeah, January 6th Commission looked into that too. They also sat there and said that, wait a minute, that why is it that the IRS went easy on Trump's tax returns? Because that was the congressional report. And that report, they're looking into why the IRS was delayed on actually investigating Trump while he was president. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's not that hard to figure out, because for the life of me, when you are president, there is this unspoken thing that nobody will prosecute you. A sitting president can't be indicted. Keep in mind, that is the opinion. That's not law. That's not fact. That is the opinion of the Department of Justice, that a sitting president cannot be indicted or investigated. And so they treat that as gospel. But keep in mind, before we had Merrick Garland, it was Jeff Sessions, and the guy before him that was the head of the Department of Justice. And even more so at the IRS, you had that one. You had I keep on wanting to say douchebag, but I shouldn't because he's got a douchey face. He had Music that was actually backing him by the Department of Treasury, and then at the same time, you had this gentleman who was literally head of the IRS, Charles Reddick. Now, why should you know Charles Reddick? Charles Reddick was literally an American attorney, and that attorney bought actual properties in Trump, as far as buying 2 Trump apartments and actually selling them at leasing, and made a boatload of money. He also contributed to Trump's campaign fund when he was president, and yet somehow became the commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Sounds like he paid for his job. But that man right there is solely responsible for reporting to Steve Munsick, who actually protected Trump's tax records. So between 2 men, the man that you're seeing right there, and Steve Munsick, the other individual, are responsible for being the actual wall that prevented Trump's taxes from being seen. And again, I fear nothing will happen to them. I fear nothing will happen. Although it should, nothing will happen. And that to me is the greatest travesty of it all. That if you really think about it, the massive cover up to protect Trump from bottom to top, and that there will be almost zero arrest or charges brought up, that is a god dang shame. It really, truly is. But moving right along, guys, we're going to go ahead and go into our feel-good segment, because usually on the Frack we got here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we use faith in humanity, but hey, it's hump day. We're not too far off from counting down the last days of 2022, and we'll leave you guys out with some good vibes. And I love these stories about soldiers coming home, especially during the holidays, because, again, shout out to those men and women who are serving overseas, especially during the holiday times. That can't be with your friends and family. That you're out there protecting our interest in oil. And I'm sorry, this is supposed to be a feel good segment. You're protecting us. You're doing the sacrifice to actually keep us safe. So we always want to give you appreciation and love and show for that. And this man that we're about to show decided to surprise his parents in a very unique way of surprise them and letting you know he's home.
Finally, the lengths one son went to make his mother's Christmas wish come true. Senior Airman Jalen Spots is about to surprise his parents with that big crate.
The plan today is for me to jump in this enormous crate behind me and roll up to the front door and surprise my family.
Spots has been serving in Italy for the past 3 years. When he recently spoke with his mom, she said she only wanted one thing for Christmas, him, which gave him an idea.
So I got on Google late night and I found Operation Home.
Operation Home is a nonprofit dedicated to raising money for enlisted service members so they can go home for the holidays.
I told them I was going to give them a Christmas gift, and they don't know it's going to be me.
Spots, climbing inside that crate, wheeled down to his parents' home. And then the big reveal.
Hi, Mom.
Oh, my baby! A reunion 3 years in the making.
I am so happy. I just can't believe my baby's home.
I love seeing good stuff like that because, again, to all the soldiers out there, wherever you are stationed, please stay safe and happy holidays. Like I said before, thank you for doing what you can do so we can do what we can do here. So with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for this podcast. Thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that as we work on this. I know my background's a little bit fuzzy, but hey, mill and moving. We're trying to get new things set up, so just bear with the brother. Before I do get out of here, do some shameless plugging as I usually do. Shout out to my buddy Vaughn at BigBZA on all socials. Definitely check him out, his podcast, his TikToks. She'll go around and show him some love. BigBZA on all socials. As for me, guys, you can find me on BlackFox447 on just about almost everything out there, except OnlyFans, because let's be honest, I don't got the body for it. But anyway, like, follow, share. Like I said before, I do post everything that I watch, that I play, and review and things of that nature, and gym stuff that I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, the link that you see at the bottom, let me make that just a wee bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that into your browser, it'll take to my link tree. That's the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts, How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and of course the Offense Podcast. Definitely like, share, subscribe, as we are going to definitely try to do it bigger in the new year. And like I said before, For all those that are watching, before I wrap this up, if you are traveling, please be safe. COVID's still out there. Please wear a mask. Please protect yourself at all times. At the same time, guys, happy holidays wherever you're at. Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Festivus for the rest of us. However you choose to celebrate or not choose to celebrate. Hopefully this new year will be everything that you are, everything that you want and wish for. Because as for us on Saturday, we will not have a How the Frack We Got Here. We will come back to you guys again in the new year on the next Wednesday with news that you can use to inform you, to empower you, to educate you is all I want to do with this podcast. So let me know if you liked it. Let me know if you didn't like it. Let me know. Aside from that, guys, last thing I'll say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide you a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a better society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black 4-star military general in the armed forces. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? Most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Have a happy new year and things of that nature, and may all your blessings come true and grind hard along with